Church? Okay, so in case of y'all have not met me or you just completely forgot my name, like who's Caleb again? Or who's the intern? My name's Caleb Kirkwood. I have been the intern for this summer, and I just want to start off by saying I have had a tremendous time here. I have enjoyed every minute of my 10 weeks here, and I couldn't have asked for a better internship thus far. Just so y'all know, it has been a great blessing for me to be here. I mean, I don't know how much I've been a blessing in your lives, but you guys have been a blessing in my life. Now, since we're talking about, this is my last Sunday here, and this is also the Peckett's family last Sunday here, usually there's a going away party of some sort. And usually sometime during that, normally, not always, there's always this one part where the person who's going to leave usually comes up and says a few last words. And it's usually something along the lines of, I have had a tremendous time here, it's been a great blessing, so on and so forth. But, now that's all well and good for when we know that the person that's leaving is still going to be in contact with us in some way or another, either through phone calls or visits across country. But what if someone's not coming back, as in they're going to pass away very soon? Those last words of how great of an honor it's been among them really weighs heavily. And even though you like to know that you have been a blessing in their lives, especially if that person that's passing away has been a great teacher to you in some form or fashion, you want this person that's passing away to give one last nugget of information that encapsulates everything that great teacher has taught into one simple phrase. In fact, we actually have a semblance of this every time we take communion every Sunday morning. Now, whenever Jesus gave his disciples the bread and gave his disciples the fruit of the vine, he said that do this in remembrance of me, as in to say all of what I have taught you comes down to this moment. Now, we know the rest of the story, that he goes on to give them a long dialogue of information in the Gospel of John. And even after that, in the Gospel of Matthew, his final words are the Great Commission, found in the Gospel of Matthew at the end of the book, and in the first part of the book of Acts, where he says, "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." It all boils down to one final word, the last words of wisdom. And then the rest of the New Testament history takes over. We have apostle after apostle rise and fall and spread Christianity. And now we're at the end of church history as we find it recorded in the Bible. And all of these great apostles, to be quite frank with you, they're old. Their lives have been spent for the most part. We have found in the Bible, we have numerous letters from Paul to various churches saying things like, "I have run my race, I have fought the good fight," and so on and so forth. So it's only natural for Peter also to do the same thing. He was one of the great pillars of the church. In our text today, 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 12 through 15, also has his last words of wisdom to the entire church. So, what kind of last words would an apostle give? We know that in modern context, last words are usually reserved for the old school or for a good James Bond villain phrase going, "Any last words, Mr. Bond," and stuff like that. Hey, I got some people to laugh. Yay! I'm not completely unfunny. Okay. It's okay to laugh at me, people. Okay. So, for most of the apostles, what information we do have from their own written accounts that are found in the Bible or through church tradition, which can be relied upon relatively easily, it all boils down to trying to stay true to the faith and staying true to sound doctrine. And the same is said for Peter. Let's go to our... here's a few famous quotes. They won't be on the slide just yet, but there are a few quotes that I remember growing up that I just went, wow, those are funny, or those are really thought-provoking. There was this one book about boyish behavior. I think it was called Big Book of Boys Stuff. Again, it's been many years ago since I've read that book. And in and among that stuff, since you're talking about boys and boys doing dumb things, last words are bound to happen. That was a bit of a joke, but okay. Okay. There was one from I want to say, Confederate general who said, "Those Yankees couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." Ah! And where you can imagine what happened to him. And then a few others. One from a relatively modern philosopher said, "Last words are for fools who haven't said enough in life." I kind of find that. I think I can find one of those fools he's talking about in that one philosopher's last words. But anyway, so let's go to our top passage and read some of Peter's last words, or at least the sum of its parts. Okay. Therefore, I intend always to remind you of these qualities, these being found in the first part of the book. Though you know them and are established in the truth that you have, I think it right, as long as I'm in this body, to stir you up by way of reminder, since I know that the putting off of my body will be soon, as our Lord Jesus Christ has made clear to me. And I will make every effort so that after my departure, you may be able at any time to recall these things. So after that, the majority of the rest of the letter in 2 Peter is devoted to how to weed out false teachers and teachers of false doctrine. Basically, Peter is saying, hey, this is what sound doctrine sounds like, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time going, this is what sound doctrine doesn't sound like. So we can actually, in verse 17, in 2 Peter 3:17, he tells his readers to be on your guard so that you are not carried away by the error of unprincipled men and the fall of your own steadfastness. This steadfastness is loosely related to the phrase in verse 12, which says, established in the truth. Peter is emphasizing that the need for believers is firmly grounded in the essential truths of the gospel, and that we are not to fall prey to false teachers. Now, there are three basic principles at work in verses 12 through 15. These are multifaceted, and sometimes they kind of blur over each other because it's such a simple fact, or facts. The first one is Peter is underscoring the importance of the Christian life and summarizes the gospel. And that summary was already given in verses 1 through 11. But he's going, I've already told you this, but I'm just going to tell you that this is important, so pay attention to it. But since that's not where we're going to focus our attention on right now, go read it. It is really fascinating and it's really interesting. The second point is our text sets up the whole letter of Peter's final statement and emphasizing its authority and importance. Because Peter is an apostle of Jesus Christ. He is one of the 12 leading men of the church. And he's going, hey, yes, it's me, Peter, the apostle, and I'm going to die soon. I want you to know everything that I know in this short, condensed letter. And the third one forms a bridge from the introduction, going, this is the summary of the gospel, and this is why you should pay attention to it, and this is what sound doctrine doesn't sound like. That's the entire narrative of the letter as a whole. So we can sum up Peter's message in this way. No matter where you are at in the Lord, you need sound teachers to remind you often the basic truths of the faith so that you can stay on course. Peter, in these few verses, models for us 4 characteristics of sound doctrine, or sound teachers, not sound doctrine. While they're not comprehensive, like this is a checklist that every sound teacher must have, these are more the skeleton frame that you can begin to look for in a sound teacher. Now, this just doesn't go for your preacher, teachers, elders, deacons, shepherds in the church. this also goes for every one of us as regular Christians, since we are in some way or another teaching someone else. Whether it is the next generation of children, I notice and I can hear a few children piping up here and there. We know that, so as an adult, we can be sound teachers and teach the next generation, or we can teach outsiders about Christianity. This goes for everyone, but he's just mostly emphasizing on teachers because most of his audience is already established Christians, and he wants them to make sure they're on the right path. Okay. The first thing that sound teachers one of their qualities is that they should always be ready to remind their students of what they already know. In verse 12, Peter says, "I will always be ready to remind you of these things, even though you already know them." And again, he repeats that in verse 13, "I consider it right, as long as I'm in this earthly body, to stir you up by way of reminder." And in verse 15, he repeats it yet again and says, "I will also be diligent that at any time after my departure, you may be able to recall these things to mind." In other words, so that you may remember them. A sound teacher wants and should always be ready to remind their students of what they already know. We actually kind of see this in the Old and New Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 5, during this is kind of true for most of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is basically this big comprehensive guide of the rest of the books of Moses. In case you didn't read all of it, it was as one teacher of mine put it, it's the old sad country and western song about Moses going to die and says all about his life. You can laugh, yay! Okay, so in Deuteronomy 5, Moses repeats the 10 Commandments, which were found in Exodus 20. Also, the first and second Chronicles basically does a drive-by history of what was recorded in 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. And then there are several Psalms or portions of them that are repeated, and also many of the Psalms have the same themes. They're emphasizing the same point. And also Old Testament prophets, if you really wanted to break down Old Testament prophets, their messages are very much the same, especially during the divided kingdom. Their messages were very simple like this. Hey, Israel and Judah, y'all are terrible people and you're going to deserve this comeuppance from God, from this foreign invader. But don't worry, God's got you covered for his select few that hold faithful to him. And after that terrible fiasco known as the Babylonian captivity, during that time, the next generation of prophets go, hey, Israel, yeah, you totally deserve that, but don't worry, everything's going to be fine. You're going to be returned to the land of your ancestors. And by the way, there's going to be this Messiah, and he's going to save the whole house of Israel and return all of God's lost sheep to him, which they interpreted as more Israelites, but in reality, he's talking about the entire world, world, all the population, Jews and Gentiles, or non-Jews. A second point is sound teachers emphasize the basic truths of Christian life. I've already kind of touched on this, but I'm just going to remind you that although Peter was an apostle and could have focused on the most up-in-the-air, multifaceted details of Christian life that many church fathers have spent decades and generations of or entire portions of their lives trying to understand. Now, at Peter's last moments, he could have easily talked about all this great stuff. But instead, he turns the tables and goes back to the basics, going, okay, I'm just going to make sure before you go too off track up here, you know where you started from. We can kind of actually see this in verse 12 when he says, you have been established in the truth which is present with you. Peter's statement is being established in the truth, that there is a body of... What? Oh, there's a typo in my notes. That explains a lot. I thought I fixed these all last night, but apparently I missed one. Okay. Peter's statement is of going back to the basics was combating a different sect of Christianity that was starting to pop up. History tells us that there is a sect of almost cult-like following of Christianity, and I use that very loosely. That they wanted to follow this enigma, what's going on, guys, teaching that makes no sense when you start questioning it. But it grew in popularity after the apostles' deaths, mostly because they were the teachers of sound doctrine, and now that they're gone, they can run rampant. And Peter kind of probably saw this coming and went, okay, the churches that I'm writing to, so that you guys don't get swept away in all of this crazy, here's the basics. And if they don't follow the basics, don't follow them. They are the false teachers that I'm going to write about for the next 2-3 chapters. So again, sound teachers emphasize the basic truths of Christian life. Okay, and then the third point is that sound teachers are always in earnest and they use their time to serve the Lord, and as long and as often as possible, because they, as Peter kind of reflects on this, time in life is short. We have verses from Psalms, Ecclesiastes, and other poetic nature in the Old Testament that a man's life is like a wisp or a fleeting of smoke, where it's here one minute and gone the next. And I've spoken to a lot of elderly people back home, back in high school, and they kind of mention the exact same thing. They go, oh wow, I didn't realize I've spent all this life doing this, that, and the other when I could have been following God. Or have I really spent this entire time following God because it felt so short and I feel like I could do so much more? And sound teachers are very much aware of that, and they use their time that they have been given to worship the Lord. I want to go back to verses 13 and 14 and just read something in a little bit detail. I, Peter, consider it right, as long as I am in this earthly dwelling, to stir you up by way of reminder, knowing that the laying aside of my earthly dwelling is imminent, as also our Lord Jesus has made clear to me. Twice in this passage, Peter uses the phrase earthly dwelling, or earthly body, which is another, what's the word? It's basically a narrative designed to say, as long as I am in the body, as long as I am alive, I will do this. The phrasing that he's using resembles more of a tabernacle or a tent, showing that his body is a temporary place. Even now, most of us don't have tents and going around living in tents all that much unless you're going hiking, which I haven't done that in a long time, but never mind. A good equivalent for the modern context would be hotels or motels. Let me take my time here, down here, for example. I was here for 10 weeks, and one family opened their home to me and gave me a room to stay in. Now, what I could have done if I thought I was going to stay here on a more permanent basis was spruce up the room, rearrange the furniture to more of my liking. But, though that would be impressive, anyway. But instead, all I really did was put up a few mementos of friends, family, and loved ones in places where I would easily see it and remember it. And so I can pick it up and put it in my backpack or a suitcase so I can bring it back whenever I leave. And that's very much the same here, where he's going, that my life is short. I don't want to be too attached to this world, but I do want to spend as much time spreading God's kingdom and eternal salvation. Okay, then the fourth one is that sound teachers are diligent to awaken their students to remember what the teacher has taught long after they've gone. Verse 13 says to stir up, as in to arouse when he's bring things back to mind whenever he's gone. And we actually kind of can see this play out very prominently in Peter's life. Uh, Peter, as we all know, is one of the closest followers of Jesus. And in fact, Peter is the one we usually make jokes about the apostles being not the most observant children or students in the classroom, because especially with Peter, Peter was warned in advance by Jesus that he was going to deny Jesus 3 times. And he's like, oh, no, Jesus, no, man, I'm going to follow you to the end, and I'll give my life for you. And what does he do by the night's end? He denies Jesus those 3 times. And when he was so easy to forget what he had been taught. And he doesn't want that kind of forgetful nature to be passed on to his students. Because of our fallen nature, we're all prone to being spiritually sluggish and lazy. Because it's so easy. It's far too easy to grow lax in just about anything, and especially when it comes to our spirituality. Because of this, we need sound teachers who are spiritually alert to prod us and wake us up to the essential truths of God. And when Peter says that after his departure, his readers will be able to call these things to mind, he's probably referring to this very letter, the letter that we call the book of 2 Peter. He wants this to be his legacy, going, this is the last words of the Apostle Peter, and I want you to remember them. And what a great legacy that is. That letter has been passed through the generations into being one of the 66 books that we consider our Bible, our canon, our way of life. So I would say props to Peter for bringing, and his disciples especially, to bringing his last words all the way down 2,000 years later to the modern day. With all this reminders, it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite psychology professors back in college. This lady was she was a sweetheart. She was one of those sweet little old ladies that hasn't become an old lady yet. Moments where she would, no matter what she was the only person, to be honest, to make psychology fun for me. And what she would do, no matter what the topic was, always, no matter how serious it was, from how a brain grows in the womb, to how it grows in adulthood, to how it is destroyed by substance abuses and other terrible things, and how all of it works, she would always say, no matter how funny or serious the conversation was, before she left, she said, now remember, no drinking, no drugging, and no sex unless you're married to that person. Every time. And it got to the point that when she retired and then came back later, she would say she did her little lesson of sorts at a little get-together from the student community, and she was going to start say that little phrase, and every last member who had taken her class, which was most of the audience, said it with her right on cue, as if they had all remembered and memorized what she had taught them. Or we just found it too funny that she said it all the time, which was mostly me, but anyway. So all of this is by way of reminder. And so no matter where you are at in the Lord, Peter is saying that you need sound teachers to remind you often of the basic truths of faith and to stay on course. And by applying his word, I would encourage you to do a few things. Continue in the Bible and to study his word so you can be more prepared to understand the great mysteries and the beauty of Jesus and his word. And also to be on the lookout for characteristics of sound teachers. Here at Lakewood, you are blessed to have great and tremendous teachers. Everyone I've had the privilege of talking about spiritual things, I have come away learning more things then after that conversation than when I started the conversation. And I'm only saying these just to remind you. Now, for those of you who may not have this great memory of great teachers and you want to know more about who this Jesus guy is that Peter dedicated his life to, we are more than willing to help you learn more. Or let's say you've backslidden and become lazy, and you want the prayers of this church, then come forward. Or you've learned all of this and you want to dedicate your life to Christ, then come forward. We can baptize you into his name. Whatever it is, I ask you to come forward as we stand and sing.